Good afternoon again. It's Archivist David Thomas at Cornwall Record Office at Truro. Welcome to another session of David's dazzling documents from the Record Office. Sometimes we can tell by just looking at a book something about its earlier history, and this particularly large volume has obviously been well thumbed, because if we look at the corners of it, we can see all the dirty marks where people's fingers have handled it as they've turned the pages over many, many years. Now, you might be intrigued to know how old this book is. It is in fact dating from the mid-14th century, around 1350. It is in fact a book of medieval plainsong music called a gradual. And the gradual book was used in the Mass during parts of the sung service of the medieval church. So let's have a look. Various notes at the front. If we look to the first page of the volume, slightly stained by damp and water over about 700 years, you can see the wonderful illuminations there are. In fact, the letter that is shown there is the letter A, which commences the word Alleluia. If we look in at some of the detail of the infill between the blue and the red sections of the letter, it's absolutely stunning what they were able to do. Let's understand how these books work. If we've been into a church and we've looked at some of the big brass or wooden lecterns that they have, they're in fact a continuation of a medieval tradition where clerks who were singers and monks or priests would gather around one great lectern which contained one great book of the services and the music. And the gradual book was part of the Mass and had the texts that were sung on different occasions. For example, here you can see on this particular page, the Latin text, Puer est natus est nobis, a boy is born to us. And this letter, the letter P, is undamaged, and you can pick up some of the incredible illumination from this particular volume, dating from around 1350. And also, it's interesting, if you look at the pages, you know which ones have been used most. We can see the grubby marks from people's thumbs and fingers here over probably many, many centuries. And just turning on a little more, be very careful with this one. I did like this because it's a capital letter E of the Latin word exaudi, and just look at the sort of little stars and flyaways that come out of that letter. The sort of clerk, the priest who wrote this, went to town on that particular part of the text of the service. You can see here the word Gloria, in Latin, blue and red infill coming behind the main blue letter. And you can see the music rises and falls. It goes up and down as the different plainsong melodies were sung. And they would have just stood around peering, perhaps in the dark, candle illuminated church, just to get a picture of what they were actually looking at and actually singing. So it's a direct link back to the Middle Ages. The book comes from the archives of the Diocese of Truro, which are kept here, most of them in the Cornwall Record Office. And here again we've got one of the larger illuminated letters, letter R of resurrection, and you can see it's absolutely incredible. You would think that was printed in the days before digital photography and photocopiers. These were only done once, and they were many, many hours of labour were put on them as works of art, and they've come down to us perhaps a little dirty and a bit thumbed, but they are incredible survival from the Middle Ages. And here we are again, the Latin text Dominus Illuminatio Mea, which is the opening words of the English psalm, the Lord is my light and my salvation. And here again, got slightly different designs around the edge. You would almost think, if you looked at this, that it had been printed, but in fact it's all hand done. One slip of the pen with those red, white and blue inks would have meant disaster. But the illuminist has done his work pretty well, I would say. And just going on, here you have the letter M for the Latin word misere. And he's sort of had, again, a bit of change of variety. One side is red and blue, and the other side, the blue predominates, and the red takes a background look. It's absolutely stunning as a record of how church service books were manufactured. And then, as with all documents, they reflect human changes and human things. A bit later on, perhaps in the 17th or the 18th century, they alter some of the text, maybe the forms of service change. And you can see here there's the standard of the changes is nowhere near the incredible 14th century original. We think this was done maybe in around 1700s, but writing's not that great. And they pasted new pages over the 14th century work. So if we can see that, and they've upset their ink pot at some point as well. So documents reflect all of the changes that there are, and it's one of our great treasures here in the Cornwall Record Office, and we hope that it will be of interest to our music and our medieval historians of that vanished past part of our heritage. Do join us again next time for some more dazzling documents.